John Harvey, thanks for joining us again on Ground Cover TV.
Pleasure to be here again. Thanks, Daryl.
John, lately R&D levies have really come under fire from some quarters. Let's put that in perspective.
I think it's important that growers look at all their costs, including the levies, and assure themselves that they are getting value for money. In relation to the grains R&D levy, growers' profit is at the centre of everything we do. That's the only reason why I exist. So any good business needs to be investing in innovation, in research and development for their future. It's not something that's specific or unique to grain growing. You take Monsanto, for example, that have a large business. They reinvest roughly 10% of their revenue goes back into R&D for the future of their business. And it's no different on grain farms. And farmers know that. When we survey growers, 78% are happy or very happy paying the levy because they know that they get the benefit at the other end.
It is real money though, approximately $2.50 out of every tonne of wheat.
So the grains R&D levy is currently 0.99%, which is less than 1%. It works out at about $2.50 per tonne for wheat. So to put that in perspective, if you look at the costs of production, fertiliser, for example, on average will cost you something like $63, $64 out of that tonne of wheat. If you look at the cost of getting the grain from farm to ship, that's something between $60 and $75 a tonne. I guess what I'm trying to say is at $2.50, that cost is reasonable when you compare it to the other costs associated with producing 1 tonne of grain.
So let's take that $2.50 for every tonne, for the average tonne of wheat based on current prices. It goes into the pot in GRDC. What happens to it there?
So as soon as that $2.50 comes into the GRDC, it's matched with a contribution from the federal government, typically about $1.40. So the amount that we've got then is $3.90. When we go away and invest that money in research projects, we typically will get a co-investment from our research partners, organisations like CSIRO, universities, departments of agriculture. They'll typically put $1 in for every dollar we put in. So that $3.90 becomes $7.80 that we're able then to invest in research for the benefit of Australian grain growers.
Producers need to know that they're getting a return on that investment though.
Absolutely, and that is the only reason why we're investing. The only reason we exist is that so that we can make Australian grain growers more profitable. It drives everything that we do. And for example, take the last season. I think a number of growers, particularly in southern New South Wales, parts of Victoria and in South Australia, were surprised how well their wheat held on in what was quite a dry finish. There was more water under their crop than they were expecting. And some of that is because of the practice changes that they are implementing on their farms. For example, over the last 5 years, we have been running the GRDC Water Use Efficiency Initiative, $17.6 million investment in the southern and western regions of Australia with a target of increasing water use efficiency by 10%.
What evidence do we have that producers are getting a return from investment that would make it worthwhile?
If we look at the results of our trials at Temora in New South Wales, early sowing of a very slow maturing variety led to a 21% improvement in water use efficiency. Go down to Tasmania, irrigating at both booting and grainfill stages increased predicted water use efficiency by 12% compared to rain-fed conditions, while irrigation based on soil water deficit and crop water use further improved predicted water use efficiency by 23% compared to rain-fed conditions. The great thing about these technologies is that you can pyramid them together, and by putting the various practices like fallow weed control with early planting, with long season varieties, with good in-crop weed control, we can increase water use efficiency from 6 kilograms per millilitre of rainfall up to 12 kilograms per millimetre of rainfall. And let's just take one example, Murray Schultz's farm in southern New South Wales, where he has actually pyramided those technologies together. He's been able to increase his yields from 2.1 tonnes per hectare to 3.6 tonnes per hectare. That is worth an extra $270 per hectare. That's the sort of innovation that we can get out of R&D.
John Harvey, it's been good talking to you once again.
Thanks, Daryl.